Today on Unscripted, AOC relates her tale of survival during the Battle of Stalingrad on January 6th. This was the incident when a band of knuckleheads stormed, and in other cases, neatly filed into the U.S. Capitol. In response, the U.S. government finally executes Order 66 and turns the war on terror against its own people. Who could have possibly seen that coming? All these stories and more here on RFX.
Dance like there's no tomorrow.
Alright, before we get started today, I'd like to take a second to apologize for my last video. I got a little too sentimental at the end of it, got really serious, and I think I fell into the trap that so many others who are doing commentary are falling into, which is simply taking this stuff way too seriously, and I think you're actually playing into the hands of the powers that be, but I will get into that more in greater depth a little later on. So in the vein of not taking things so seriously, I would like to play this wonderful, wonderful soundbite by Chuck Schumer, who's now the Senate Majority Leader. He's talking about Trump's impeachment trial. Let's take a listen to that soundbite.
There will be a trial, and when that trial ends, senators will have to decide if they believe Donald John Trump incited the insurrection against the United States.
That's a great soundbite. It was one hell of a flub. Donald Trump, he incited an erection on January 6th. I mean, and I love Chuck Schumer's face right after he says it. You know, he's like, oh, shit. And like, that was on the record, right? Like, and I wonder, like, in these proceedings, do they have a court reporter who types verbatim every single thing that he says in his speech? I'm pretty sure they do. On January 6th, Donald Trump incited an erection in the United States Capitol. You know, I think it would be a fun game to play for at least the next few weeks. Every time I make these videos, I'm going to just swap those two words out. So you're never going to be quite sure which one I'm talking about. So in the future, if I say that it's possible that Chuck Schumer was looking at pictures of insurrections on his computer right before he came out to give this speech, you're not going to be quite sure what I'm talking about. Or, you know, if we discuss the, attempted erection at the Capitol. The possibilities are endless with what we could do with this erection. I think that so many members of Congress came within an inch of their lives when that massive erection came storming into the Capitol. I mean, look, it's common knowledge. When some people see an insurrection, it causes them to want to have an insurrection of their own. You know, they want to join in on the excitement. Sometimes it's just too hard to pass up on a good insurrection. We all know this. One thing that January 6th made very clear, and there can be no equivocation about this, is that there can be no erection of any sort, no matter how lame, limp, or impotent one might say its attempt. It's not acceptable at the U.S. Capitol, no matter what. I mean, you can have an erection in, say, I don't know, Portland or Seattle, but not in the U.S. Capitol. Any other city, fine. It's fine. New York, it's okay. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. You can raise up your insurrection and start breaking some windows with it. Maybe even jam it into a few police stations. That's fine. But look, the lesson here really is that you just have to keep your erection away from Nancy Pelosi because it freaks her out. She's 80 years old. She can't handle seeing a massive erection right in front of her like that. Come on, it's just common decency. Keep that insurrection safely tucked away out of sight in other parts of the country. Bust it out there if you have to. Break some windows with it. Do whatever you gotta do. But don't do it in Washington, D.C., and especially not within at least 100 yards of Nancy Pelosi, and definitely don't do it anywhere near AOC. She gets all crazy. She sees an insurrection, and she goes freaking bananas. If you look at her latest Instagram, you can tell that as soon as she saw that insurrection, she flipped out. She absolutely flipped out, and she had like an hour straight on Instagram ranting and raving about that giant insurrection that almost cost her life. Right? But look, that's the ultimate moral of the story here, okay? Keep your erections to other cities. Don't bring them to D.C. It is an erection-free zone. Don't do it. I gotta say, when I look at people like Chuck Schumer, what's he doing? I would say that upwards of 90% of the members of Congress, why can't we just laugh them all off the stage? Anytime I look at these people who are the most visible figures of our government and have supposedly the most senior positions, I'm struck by how cartoonish they all are. Like they're all ripe for a caricature. And you think this can't be who's in charge. This cannot be who's truly in charge of this country. When you look at Chuck Schumer and his massive insurrection, and you look at Nancy Pelosi, or you look at AOC, or any of them, or even Donald Trump, and you say, my God, this is who's in charge? When you look at the scope of American power all around the world, I think we have upwards of 800 military bases in like over 100 countries. We've got 11 super carriers and I think 11 more smaller aircraft carriers, and we control every single ocean on the planet. We've got all these satellites, submarines, you name it. All this crazy stuff. And then when you think about the economy and you think about the Federal Reserve and the dollar being the world's reserve currency and all the power that comes with that, and being able to have a significant influence over SWIFT transactions, which is how like digital transactions, doesn't matter. Point is that when you think of the sheer scope of American power and you think this is who's in charge? Nancy Pelosi? That, like, she's one of the most powerful people on the planet? That's who's in power? Those are the most powerful people on the planet. Really? Really? I cannot wrap my head around that. I can't say, of all the people on the planet, these are the most powerful ones. That just can't be true. And if that's not true, well then, hey, I guess that opens me up to some really great conspiracy theorists about who the actual puppet masters are behind the curtain, pulling the strings. And when you look at these people, they're either, in the case of someone like a Pelosi or a Schumer or a McConnell, they are literally just a puppet and someone else is pulling their strings. Or if it's someone like AOC, I don't think anyone's pulling her strings, or at least for the most part not. I think she is just the most classic example of a useful idiot that's ever existed in human history. And in the spirit of that, I would like to show this quick little montage. This will also make you smile, of AOC from a recent live stream she did on Instagram following the erection on Capitol Hill on January 6th.
Many, many, many members of Congress were almost murdered. Children of members of Congress were there. As for myself, I do not know if I can even disclose the full details of that event due to security concerns. I had a very close encounter where I thought I was going to die. At the end of your life, and all of these thoughts come rushing to you, I did not know if I was going to make it to the end of that day alive. I want to cut straight to the chase. Wednesday was an extremely traumatizing event. And it is not an exaggeration to say that many, many members of the House were nearly assassinated. It's just not an exaggeration to say that at all. Republican members of Congress didn't wear masks. They refused to wear masks in that enclosed, secure location. I myself did not even feel safe going to that extraction point. I didn't even feel safe around other members of Congress. But they don't give a damn about the law. They don't give a damn about order. They don't give a damn about safety. They give a damn about white supremacy. They care about preserving the social order and the mythology of whiteness. If any member of Congress so much as stutters They can't even win with the deck stacked in their favor. And so what they are willing to do is set a match and light our entire democracy on fire so that they can uphold the social order of white supremacy. That's what this is about. Straight up. The tragedy of white supremacy is that it is doomed to fail. He fist pumped insurrectionists that killed 5 people, 4 people, and potentially a 5th. We don't know. Because the amount of people that have been radicalized in this country is very, very large.
You know, they say that self-awareness is the hallmark of wisdom. Now, for reasons I won't get into, I recently had to watch the movie 13 Going on 30, starring Jennifer Garner. And this is a movie where she's 13 years old, and in a sort of a spin-off from the movie Big, she wishes to be a grown-up, and then the next day she wakes up in the body of Jennifer Garner, who's 29, and she has a career, etc., etc. And so you have this 13-year-old who has to pretend to be a grown-up and blah, blah, blah. And sometimes I wonder if that's what's happening with AOC. If, like, maybe, I don't know, a couple years ago, she was only like a 12-year-old, and then she wished to be a grown-up, and then she woke up as fully grown AOC, and then she ran for Congress, and, like, the whole thing is this bad Disney movie. I'm not saying that that's a likely possibility. I'm just saying it's possible. It's at least a little bit possible that that's what's happening here. So, every time I hear AOC speak, I'm reminded of this wonderful story that my dad used to tell me about this old Russian chess master who, is one of the top players in the whole world. And he's at this tournament, and as he's working his way up through the brackets, he has to play this, much lower ranked chess player who's nowhere near as good as he is. But for some reason that the Russian chess master can't explain, he's losing. And as the game progresses, and it gets to a point where there's no way he can win, he finally, in exasperation, jumps up on the table, knocking over all the pieces, raises his hands to the sky, and yells, "Why must I lose to this idiot?" I think that's how we all should feel every time we see someone like AOC in a position of fame and power. Anytime you criticize someone like her, like, people always try to dismiss you as, oh, it's because you're sexist, or, oh, it's because you are racist, or whatever else. No. I don't care what color she is. I don't care if she's a woman, she's a guy, whatever she is. She's just an idiot. For example, I can criticize Gavin Newsom all day. I actually hate Gavin Newsom even more than I hate AOC, and that's really saying something. And Gavin freaking Newsom is basically a body double for Christian Bale in American Psycho. Right? You can't get any more white than that, right? So it has nothing to do with race or gender or anything like that. It doesn't. It just doesn't. What it has to do with is that she sounds like a completely unhinged moron, and yet she's probably the future of the Democratic Party. It's only a matter of time until she's sitting in Nancy Pelosi's chair, or when she runs for president, and she'll probably win. And so I gotta say, I'm like the Russian chess master. Why must I lose to this idiot? And I think everybody should feel like that. Why must we all lose to this idiot? And it's so frustrating. But what can I say? But listening to her talk about the erection on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, here's the thing about what she was doing right there. Now, a lot of critics of AOC would say that she was doing some kind of Machiavellian power move where she was, amplifying the severity of the erection so as to achieve some sort of political gain, right? But I don't think that's what she was doing. I actually think she was being genuinely honest about everything she was saying. Her emotional state, the gross exaggerations, all of it. I think she 100% believes in it. I don't think she was making it up. I don't think she was play acting. I don't think she was doing anything like that. And she certainly wasn't doing some 4D chess political move. I don't think that's what she was doing at all. What I actually think is that people like her have never truly been in danger before. They're a human being who's never really been threatened in any physical way before. And everybody fears what they don't understand and what they don't have any experience with. You know, it's just a big question mark, and you're terrified of it. And I think people like her, when they finally have just the tiniest taste of real danger, they flip the fuck out. Like, super flip out. And that's what you saw with the Joe Biden's inauguration day, when you had those 25,000 National Guard troops and all this stuff. I think there was a report that Nancy Pelosi specifically requested that they have crude machine guns, like on all corners of the city. You know, like those 50 cals that'd be mounted on top of a Humvee. So the point is that when these people, think of them as like these frilly aristocrats who've never so much have gotten a paper cut before, and the second that they get in the slightest bit of danger, they just flip out and they're like, we want it all. We want thousands of troops, we want tanks, we want everything, but razor wire around the whole place. We're terrified. We don't feel safe in that. Like, they're completely freaking out. Completely freaking out because they've never actually experienced any level of danger or anything else. Now, sure, there might still be an ancillary political benefit to all this. I mean, when she's, you know, talking about how unsafe she felt and that she thinks other members of Congress, her Republican members of Congress, are going to literally kill her and stuff. It's so manipulative. It's such a, like, instinctively manipulative thing that some people do. And she's one of them. And my God, it's just... the Russian chess master. Why must we lose to these idiots? Why? Not just AOC, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer and his massive insurrection, all of this stuff, right? Like, why must we all lose to these idiots? I mean, for God's sake, it's just, can we not have more impressive leaders? Can we please have slightly more impressive leaders than this? People that you could actually take seriously to at least some degree? Do we have to have these walking caricatures? Why? Why must it be this way? Now, I have a few, you know, misanthropic theories, of course, and that I blame them, but I also blame us, because in some ways they're products of their environment. They behave the way that they are because of the reactions that we would have if they behaved differently. So they've been sculpted to behave in the way that they are by us in some way. And so, to be honest, they're not going to change until we change. And of course, that's never going to fucking happen. So look, I can throw criticism all the way around. Myself, you, the listener, whoever you are listening to this right now, you're part of the problem. I don't care who you are, you're part of the problem. And so am I. And so's Chuck Schumer, and so's AOC. We're all part of the problem. So until people change in general, and I don't know how we're going to do it, probably not going to do that. We're going to continue to have idiotic leaders, and we're going to make stupid choices, and the world's just going to spin on. And that's just the way life's going to be. Now, at the start of this video, I mentioned one thing about how I think that if you take the erection in Washington, D.C. too seriously, then you play right into the hands of the powers that be. I'm starting to see that now. For months now, I've been watching primarily conservative commentators talk about, oh my God, are we on like the brink of another civil war? And you're even starting to see that filter into mainstream media. It's on everybody's mind. But just think for a second. Just think for a second. If you're the powers that be, maybe you want people to be thinking that. You want people to be thinking that the situation in the country is far more volatile and on the precipice of violence than it actually is. Because then you can justify taking the war on terrorism and turning it inwards, as everyone with half a brain knew they were going to do right from the start. I think the more people who believe that the country is teetering on the edge of absolute collapse in civil war and violence, the more people who believe that, the more people who will accept with open arms this so-called domestic war on terror. Now, let me just play a quick soundbite here from Glenn Greenwald. He was on Fox. He does an amazing job every time. The guy just hits the nail right on the head every single time he does one of these quick little hit interviews. Let's just take a quick listen to that soundbite, and we'll talk about it here.
Laura, the entire goal of the Democratic Party, from starting with Joe Biden, and this isn't me saying this, the Wall Street Journal and others have reported it, is to institute a new war on terror bill that's modeled after the first war on terror that was directed outward at foreign actors and foreign governments, but to bring all of those powers inward. Adam Schiff has a bill pending since 2019 that they want to now use a pretext for, which is that America is on the verge of civil war. There's roving bands of insurgents. This is all designed to entrench powers in their hands that we would never otherwise agree that they should have, to surveil people, to monitor people, to infiltrate groups, to break up protests, to criminalize speech. And we have to be extremely vigilant about the role the media is playing in that.
All right, so there you go. Right there, I would say that, yeah, he's absolutely right. I think there is definitely an agenda. And here's the thing. People, you've got to get outside the duopoly here. You've got to get outside of that. You can't possibly believe, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, that the Democrats who are in Congress or the Republicans who are in Congress or whoever it is that occupies the White House, I don't care if it's Trump or Biden or Mickey Mouse, it doesn't matter. They're not on your side. You know whose side they're on? Their own. That's whose side they're on. They're not even on the side of like the big corporations. They're like the middlemen, like the giant business interests that truly control and own just about everything in the country and therefore make all the real big decisions to insulate themselves from the people who one day might have pitchforks in their hands. They have the politicians as like an intermediary, so that when the pitchforks come out, they'll be gunning for the politicians as like a layer of insulation for the ultra-wealthy business interests that actually run the country and make all the important decisions. That's who the politicians are. And they're just sort of playing both sides. Every once in a while, they'll take a jab at the corporations if they think they can win a few points with the people. But for the most part, they're going to be acting on behalf of the corporations because that has most of the money. But that's who politicians really are. And so every once in a while, yeah, they can do something that benefits you, but it's really only by chance, and it's only if they truly think that they themselves will benefit from it in some way or not. So to get back to the original point that Glenn Greenwald was talking about there, I think this has definitely been the plan all along. It's to turn the war on terror, which for the past 20 years has been directed externally, and turn it internal, and to start using all those new governmental powers against your own people. We've gotten so used to calling Muslim extremists just extremists, and that's who the bad guy is. Anybody who's extreme. If you're an extremist of any sort, you're the bad guy. And, you know, so we've got this culture probably that's built up within the military and special forces where insurgents and extremists and stuff have been the bad guy for so long that that's built up in the culture that it's really not going to be too much of a stretch to start looking at domestic groups, whether it's Antifa on the left or various elements of Magistan on the right, and say, you know, like QAnon, for example, and to say, okay, these are the new enemies, and let's start employing the same tactics against insurgencies and terrorists that we've used abroad, except let's just use them against our own people and internally. And I find that to be one of the most terrifying things I've ever heard in my entire freaking life. But I gotta say, I knew this was coming. I so wish I had been making these videos 20 years ago, or whenever it was that YouTube would have first come out, so that I could then point you back to when I was like 20 years old and didn't know shit, but I did know one thing, and it was that they were going to do exactly this. If anything, I'm just surprised it's taken this long. I would have thought they'd be doing it within 5 years. I guess it took them 20. But I knew this was coming. I think anybody who was half awake and could read between lines to any level whatsoever knew that this was coming. It was only a matter of time before the war on terrorism went from an external thing to an internal thing. It was only a matter of time. I freaking knew it. So, I guess that's it for today. If you haven't yet, smash the like button, share this video with your friends. Just do it. Do it right now. It's the right thing to do, and you know it. And also make sure to subscribe, because all these things really, really help. So I will catch you next time, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.